Straight from New Jersey, it's the SNL Nerds, the show where two comics from New Jersey nerd out about Saturday Night Live. I'm your co-host, Darren Patterson.
And I'm your co-host, John Trumbull.
John Trumbull, how are you doing during these hazy, crazy, lazy days of summer, good sir?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. This week was an interesting week. We actually saw each other in person this week.
Yes, we did.
A bit unusual for us these days.
I know, IRL, as the kids say on the Twitter's gram.
Yeah, we had a little get-together for my birthday on Monday night, and that was fun. Went out to dinner.
Yeah, like a nice little soiree. Had a good group of folks here to wish you well into the 5-0s. It was pretty nice, drinking outdoors, laughing, guffawing, having a good old chuckle 'em ups. It was a nice little August night.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. It's always weird when you have like friends from your different circles of friends like meeting each other, but it was cool too.
Yeah, it's like the multiverses colliding.
It really is, yeah.
Like the Jetsons meet the Flintstones. I get it.
Yes, that's exactly what it was.
It's like that. Or like when Scooby-Doo met the Harlem Globetrotters or something like that.
You're a Jetson.
Yeah. I'm totes a Jetson. That's so Jetsons. That's me. Yeah, it's like the world's colliding. It's like when the Harlem Globetrotters saw Gilligan's Island and stuff. It's like that.
Martin Landau was in that,
He was?
He was.
He played Gilligan? Who did he play?
I don't remember who the hell he played.
All right.
I'm sure it's on YouTube.
You're the one that brought up the facts. I just thought you were knowledgeable.
I was expecting you to just take that at face value and just be like, oh, wow, he was in that. And I wasn't expecting to be quizzed further on that.
You didn't expect me to ask any follow-up questions on that?
No, I really wasn't. I know at that point, Jim Backus was like too sick to appear. So I think he just had like a cameo. And then they had like Mr. Howell's nephew in there or something.
How did he get on the island?
Well, no, by that point...
What?
Okay, this I do remember. By that point, they had been rescued from the island, but they all decided to go back to the island and start a resort there.
Why would you go back to the prison of the island that you were on that you couldn't get off of for numerous? That seems.
I think it was like Sherwood Schwartz. He was trying to like redo it as like a Love Boat sort of thing, where like different people would come to the resort every week or every movie, and he'd get milk some more out of the Gilligan Island thing that way.
Oh, I see. So
I'm not saying this was a good idea. I'm saying this was an idea.
Yeah, it's no Gilligan's Planet. I'll give you that.
I mean, I don't think Sherwood Schwartz had a great deal of artistic integrity, is what I'm saying.
It's like, I came up with this one good idea, and I will milk it until it is dry and done.
Yeah, I mean, I know they did, in the first TV movie they did get rescued from Gilligan's Island. I think it was called Rescue from Gilligan's Island. And then at the very end of that TV movie, they end up getting stranded on the same island again.
Yes, that I do remember. And that was like, oh, they're back on the island again. Oh, boy.
And then they somehow got rescued again. I don't know if that was in another TV movie or between TV movies or what. But yeah, then they meet the Harlem Globetrotters.
Got it. Okay. All right.
And there were like robot Harlem Globetrotters. I remember that.
Yes, I remember that. They were fighting like sentient robots at some point,
right,
or something. Because somebody was like, "I need to make an army of basketball playing robots to dominate the NBA,"
right.
And then the Harlem Globetrotters came in to rescue. It was like, "Not today, sir," and there was like a man versus machine type of thing.
Yeah, and I feel like Martin Landau was probably the bad guy in that. I'm going to look it up now.
Oh boy, wow! Right off the rip, we're going down rabbit holes, people.
Well, hey, you asked.
I didn't really. I just mentioned Harlem Globetrotters on some whim, like a riff, and now here we are. I love it.
Okay, he does have a listing on Gilligan.fandom.com, which is the Gilligan's Island wiki.
Of course, there's a Gilligan's Island wiki.
Let's see. He appeared in it with his wife. The final time they appeared together on screen, they divorced in 1993.
Oh,
What did he play? Okay, this is a big summary of.
okay. Wow, I'm
Yeah,
glued
I
to my
think this
seat.
is just shit copied from his Wikipedia entry. There's not much
Okay.
Gilligan's Island specific information on the Martin Landau page. So let me see.
Well, somebody at the Gilligan's Island wiki page is slacking. Need to get on that.
Okay. Guest cast. He played J.J. Pearson and
Oh,
and and Barbara Bain. Okay, yeah, because he was married to Barbara Bain. She was Dr. Olga Smetna.
Gesundheit.
So, and Scatman Crothers was in it.
Ooh, Scatman Crothers
So,
should have led with that.
yeah.
All right. Wow. Okay. Okay. Wow. And thus ends our Gilligan's Island Harlem Globetrotter rant opening there, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen. Wow.
So,
Listeners, you know us. You know, we go down rabbit holes like right off the rip. So I
yeah.
mean, are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
I mean, I figure it's about a 50-50 chance. Much
Yes.
like people who watched the Harlem Globetrotters on Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
Apparently, the
Absolutely.
second TV movie was called The Castaways on Gilligan's Island.
Oh, that was interesting.
That was the follow up to Rescue from Gilligan's Island,
Oh,
and it was
wow.
intended to be the potential pilot for a new series.
The Castaways. Okay, all right. Let's see what they did there.
So,
You got to keep Gilligan's Island in there somewhere, like Planet of the Apes type of thing, and then you just
yeah,
switch out
yeah.
the. All right. Hmm. All right.
Okay,
Well,
yeah.
that's
So that one, they're rescued from the island, and then they convert it into a tropical resort.
okay.
So,
It's not a terrible idea, I guess, as long as
isn't it though?
ah, maybe it is. It kind of reminds. It's like when they had when the Golden Girls ended, and then they had Golden
Yeah,
Palace, the spinoff where the girls just let's just open a bed and breakfast, and it's just
sure,
three
with
of
Don
us.
Cheadle. Yeah,
Yeah, with Don Cheadle and Cheech Marin and as the cook. Yeah, remember that, guys?
yeah.
Yeah, that was a show. That was there.
That was a thing that existed, and
Indeed. Much like this
yes,
movie.
much like the movie we are doing today, we are
Yeah.
doing
Sweet
yet
segue,
another
right?
thing that made you think, wait, hey, was that real? We're covering Man on the Moon, the biopic about Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, Man on the Moon came out Christmas time, December 22nd, 1999. Right in the middle of the Y2K. Directed by Milos Forman, the man who
Mm-hmm.
brought us Amadeus, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, People vs. Larry Flint. Written by Scott Alexander and Larry Karazinski, who
Yes.
the duo that wrote Ed Wood, People vs. Larry Flint. Dolomite is my name, which we've talked about on this podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, this film had a budget of between 52 and 82 mil, and only grossed 47 mil. And like I remember when this movie came out, this was like one of the films I actually like reviewed for my college newspaper,
Mm-hmm.
back in the day. And I remember there being a lot of buzz about this film. I remember a lot of
Yeah.
people were saying like, "Oh, Jim Carrey as Andy Kaufman. Oh, like he even kind of looks like him. He's perfect for the part." And
No,
I
he
mean,
doesn't. He doesn't look like
all
him.
right, well,
I mean,
you
they
gotta
made him look as much
right,
like Andy Kaufman as they could, but no, he doesn't really
right,
look like Andy
right.
Kaufman.
I mean, that's what I meant. Like once you change his hair up and stuff,
Yeah.
like he had like the same mannerisms as him, and
Mm-hmm.
it was this movie is by this director that made all these classic films. This writing crew that had this writing duo that wrote all these classic films. This seemed like oh, this is gonna like sweep at the Oscars. I remember that being the buzz at the time. We're like, oh,
Yeah.
Jim's gonna get an Oscar nom for this, and it came out, and it just wasn't quite there. It was just
Yeah, I don't. It didn't. It's a good film. I don't know why it didn't do great business. Maybe people had just sort of lost interest in or forgotten about Andy Kaufman by that point. I don't know. I don't know.
I think so. You think so? Because like I know, like Andy Kaufman, he has like a diehard like fan base out there, and like even like the mythos and the mystique of Andy is still present to this day. Like whenever you see somebody like like when Tom Green came out, or even now like when like maybe Eric Andre or Sacha Baron Cohen, like people always kind of compare what they do to Andy Kaufman. They're like, oh, they're
Hmm.
very Kaufman esque in what they're doing. So like even to this day, his presence still kind of looms pretty heavy in comedy circles, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean he's remembered, but I just don't. Is that mainly by comedy buffs, or? I mean, I was meaning more the general public. Does the general public
Oh,
still care about Andy Kaufman? I don't know.
hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe not. Like, yeah. I always think of things in comedy nerd thought, so I just
Yeah,
assume everybody has my same comedy nerd brain, and I always forget. Like, oh yeah, not everybody has seen Mr. Show or whatever,
yeah.
although they
Yeah,
should.
that's what I'm saying. Or maybe it's just because it wasn't the Jim Carrey that they want. They want to see Jim Carrey be funny on his own. They don't necessarily want to see him in dramatic roles,
Mm.
or they don't want to see him playing another funny person. I don't know.
Yeah, but see, that's a good point. Like, I do remember when the cable guy came out, people like I think people like it now, but I remember when it came out, people were like, "I don't get it. It's just dark.
Yeah,
He's not like." People really didn't like it. There was even that one pop song that kind of dissed him, like she loves me for me, and then
hmm,
I don't know why they didn't like. I thought the cable guy was great. I thought it was fantastic, but people didn't attach to it for whatever reason. But I do think like around this time, as far as drama wise, people were starting to warm up to him being in drama because like he'd already done the Truman Show before this,
right.
and he got a Golden Globe for it. So like I think people were
Yeah,
like starting to become okay with him doing dramas and
and he
whatnot.
got a Golden Globe for this performance as well.
Yes, yes,
Not nominated for an Oscar though, which is kind of unusual when you're nominated for and win a Golden Globe. That's usually considered like a precursor to the Oscars. But
yeah. It's weird. Like apparently he's never been nominated for an Oscar. Like I looked that up, and I was like,
hmm,
oh really? Nothing? That's that's interesting. Because I don't know. I feel like he's done some stuff that's like at least worth a nomination, but not so much. Not
yeah,
so
you'd
much.
think. And hey, and you might be wondering, well, hey, outside of comedy, what is the connection to SNL? And Andy Kaufman's career did cross over with Saturday Night Live. He was actually on the very first episode of Saturday Night Live, and they recreate that appearance in this movie.
Yeah, they go all the way with the recreation, so much as having Lorne Michaels in this scene, where
Yeah, and
I
Don Pardo.
and Don Pardo.
Yeah, because Don Pardo was still with us when this movie was done in 1999.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and so they cover his appearances on SNL, and he was actually sort of famously or infamously voted off SNL by the audience.
Yeah, that's something else they do too, where they have Lorne Michaels, doing the. Do you think because like around this time, this was around the time where he was wrestling women, and then getting into it the beef he had with like Jerry the King Lawler, which
Right.
we'll talk about later, and just people just kind of thinking, oh, is he really going off the deep end? Is this because like that's another thing that throughout this movie, as you start to sort of learn about Andy, is he just really likes to blur the lines between like reality and pranks. Like you never know, is he putting
Yeah.
you on? Is this the real Andy? Is this a gag? Is this like a gag within a gag? Is this a prank within a prank? Like you never
Yeah.
know what's real and what's not. And that's what he likes. He really likes to mess with people's minds and poke and prod and really kind of just mess with you just mess with your what you think comedy should be and what it and just what is real and what's not. Like he really liked to subvert expectations. Like that was
Yeah,
his
yeah. I mean,
key thing.
he was kind of a pioneer in meta comedy or anti comedy might be more accurate, where he really, in many ways, he made like the audience the punchline, where it's like, and there's one moment in the movie that's very telling where Danny DeVito playing Kaufman's manager George Shapiro, he says to Andy Kaufman and his co-writer and best friend Bob Zamuda, he's like, you've made you've made a joke that is only funny to you two. It's not funny to the audience. It's funny to you two. And they're both like, yeah, isn't it great? and, and I think that sums up their approach to comedy very, very well. It's kind of cool that those two guys found each other because they
Yeah.
were so of like mind.
Yeah, like I mean that's one of the things. I mean I like this movie, but I do feel like it glossed over a lot of things. Like
Uh
one
huh.
of which being like how did he and Bob Zamuda meet? They don't ever address that in the movie. They just like it's just. I mean, I guess that's one of the things in this movie. I was like, I wish I had seen that because like in
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
movie kind of starts. Well, I mean, it had a really interesting start, which I really liked, where
Hmm.
it has like the black and white footage of uh, Jim Carrey as Andy Kaufman talking to the audience in a his foreign man accent, like a Gravis accent, saying, hello, thank you for my name is Andy, thank you for watching this movie. I'll admit, like right off the top, it's not a very good movie. It kind of stinks. So like I cut all.
Hmm.
There's a lot of lies in it, so I cut out all the fat, all the baloney, and I cut out so much of the lies in this film that this is actually the end of the film. This is it, and then
Right,
it's
and
like
then they start running the credits.
yeah, the actual credits
Yeah,
and like him playing the record. It's like no, I'm not joking. That it's over, and like I thought that
yeah.
was a really interesting way to start the movie. Actually,
I think that's yeah, it was a very clever way to start the movie because it gets you questioning like right from the rip, um, what's real, what's a put on, and it's a cool atypical opening for a movie about a very atypical comedian. Um, and then after he like leaves the screen and we're just left with several seconds of a black screen and then Kaufman comes back on and he's like, well, hey, are all the I just wanted to get rid of all the people who just didn't get me and
yeah, yeah, and then but see that's the thing though. Like it has that really interesting opening, but then the rest of the movie is kind of a paint by numbers biopic. I was like, I wish they kind of mess with the formula there too, as far as biopics go. I
I don't
thought,
know if it was
or maybe not.
necessarily paint by numbers, but yeah, it does fall into more typical biopic rhythms, and I think that's almost unavoidable, you know.
Yeah, I suppose.
Because I mean, lives aren't really meant to be fit into a three act structure. So, and they do things in this movie to kind of give his life more of an arc. Like, I mean, a big thing they do is they move his Carnegie Hall concert like 5 years into the future from where it occurred in life. He played Carnegie Hall in 1979, and in the movie they have it happening near the end of his life in like 1983.
Yeah,
And they
yeah,
present it, and that's the sort of thing that you do in a biopic because you need something to give it that big ending.
that's true. Yeah, like they definitely kind of messed around with a few things just for
Mhm,
to make the movie a little bit more interesting. But yeah, like I mean, back to my point about Bob Zamuda, like I kind of wished I saw like how they met, how did they find each
mhm,
other, how did they realize they had the same comedic sensibilities? Because like I said, like the movie starts after that intro, the movie then goes to like Andy as a kid doing shows in his own bedroom to himself, playing with puppets, and then it just cuts to him in his 20s doing doing stand up comedy in a bar to like disinterested barflies. I was like, well,
yeah.
where's that all that his teenage years and all that stuff in like leading up to him in his 20s and him figuring out what's his type of comedy. I would have liked to have known that. right?
Yeah. Actually, in real life, Bob Zmuda, around the time of this movie, he wrote a book, a biography of Andy Kaufman called Andy Kaufman Revealed: Best Friend Tells All. And he
Mm.
goes into his first meeting about with Kaufman there. So I definitely recommend reading that. Um, and yeah, they met at a comedy club, and I know Zamuda said he saw him as like as his foreign man character, which later evolved into Latka on Taxi.
Mm.
And he tricked Zamuda into like helping him load up all his equipment into his car. I think he was saying like he had a bad back or something like that. So Zamuda loaded it all into his car, and then at the last second, Kaufman dropped character and just went "sucker" and drove off. And that was like their first meeting. I remember that story.
See, that could have been. Why wasn't that in the movie? That's pretty cool or interesting. Like, I don't know. There's like a. I feel like there was more that they kind of left out of the movie that like
Yeah,
stuff
well,
like that.
I
I thought
think
was
maybe because Zamuda was always in on the joke, and the movie's kind of told from the point of view of people who aren't necessarily in on the joke. So if we told it
mm,
from Zamuda's point of view, I feel like it would have been a different kind of movie.
hmm,
Because I don't feel like he ever pulled the wool over Bob Zmuda's eyes. At least that's not the impression that I get. But
yeah,
Bob Zmuda is not necessarily the most reliable source either, because Zmuda likes perpetuating the myths about Andy Kaufman.
yeah. No, he
So
does. He does. That's true. Like, yeah, the whole thing is kind of told from the, I guess, perspective of George Shapiro, played
yeah,
by Danny
kind
DeVito.
of, and it's so interesting that Danny DeVito plays George Shapiro, and Danny DeVito was also a producer on this movie, and Danny DeVito was, of course, one of Andy Kaufman's co-stars on Taxi. So
Yeah, a lot of meta levels to this whole thing. Like
yeah,
I actually really like the scenes where, but, all right, so after he does his they do kind of jump a little bit because like after he
yeah,
does his performance to uninterested, bar customers, then the owner of the bar says, "Yeah, I got to let you go, Andy. People don't get your act." Oh, and actually, that person, the bar owner, that's the real George Shapiro
yeah,
who was in it, and then Andy just goes into he does his act at another place, the Improv, and George Shapiro, played by Danny DeVito, happens to be in the audience, and he sees
hmm,
Andy do his Elvis act, his very famous Elvis act, where
right,
he comes on
right.
stage as the foreign man, and then he kind of goes into
He
this.
does some bad impressions, and then
Yes,
he lulls that audience into that false sense of security, and then he does, like he says, "I'm going to do my Elvis Presley," and then he does a spectacular Elvis Presley.
right.
And Andy Kaufman did do a genuinely good Elvis Presley impression. He did it on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. You can look that up and see. And even Elvis Presley said like, "Oh yeah, that's the best impression of me by far."
Yeah, that's pretty good there, Andy.
Yeah. I like the cut of your jib, mister. Um,
I'm trying to think of lines that Jack White said in Dewey Cox now, but I can't think of anything now.
there's only two people who know karate. That's Chinese people and the king.
Hoo-ha, watch out.
uh, God, now I just want to watch Walk Hard again.
It's a fancy, yeah, it's a, oh, that movie's so good.
But I mean, yeah, Shapiro comes backstage and he realizes he gives Kaufman his card, and he thinks he's like genuinely from what country was it from? Did he think
Caspiar.
he was? Well, not the fake country, the real country,
Oh, like
Lithuania or something like
yeah,
that, or
yeah, yeah.
yeah. And then when Kaufman sees the card and realizes that Shapiro's for real, he like drops the character and he's like, "Oh yeah, yeah." um,
Yeah. And
um,
then then after that, the very next scene, almost like he gets a gig on SNL,
yeah.
introduced
Well, I
by.
mean that's always what they do in the biopics, is because you want to get to the part where they're known and successful. So it always makes it feel like they become successful in like a 5 minute period instead of over the course of several years of struggle.
That's true.
So I mean, and they parody that in Walk Hard too,
Yeah, very much
where
so.
Dewey Cox sings like one song and then he's the biggest thing ever. I mean, that's just what biopics do.
Wow, this podcast is turning into a Dewey Cox podcast very quickly.
Yeah, but I mean,
Stay out of here, and you don't want no part of this shit.
Yeah. I mean, and Andy gets an offer to be on Taxi, where they basically want to co-opt his foreign man character and turn him into Latka, a mechanic on the show. And he doesn't want any part of that shit. He makes demands. He's like, well, I don't want to be on every episode. I'm only going to work 2 days instead of the 5 days the rest of the cast rehearses. And he was apparently he was able to do that because Andy Kaufman had like a photographic memory, so he could just like read the script and then know it. He didn't really have to rehearse. He'd have a stand-in for rehearsals on Taxi.
Yeah,
And then he would just come in on show days.
yeah, because
So
because Andy like really detested like sitcoms and TV shows because he thought it was like all so fake, which it is. Like it's just canned
yeah,
laughter. You stand here, you say these lines somebody else wrote, you say your phrase, laugh track, and like there's
right.
no spontaneity to it. There's no anything. There's nothing unexpected to it. And that's all. Which I mean, I get it. That's true, but like
Yeah, yeah.
it's
And it's
interesting.
it's also so interesting that in this movie they have the real cast of Taxi come on and play themselves making the show.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we've got the real Judd Hirsch, we've got the real Mary Lou Henner, Jeff Conway, Christopher Lloyd, um,
Carol Kane.
Carol Kane, yeah, and they all come back. Tony Danza apparently wasn't available because he was uh, on Broadway at the time. He was doing A View from the Bridge on
Mm.
Broadway, and Danny DeVito.
Well,
Of
of course.
course, we don't want to have him playing himself in addition to playing George Shapiro, so he just says, "Yeah, just don't show me during that." So there's no Louis De Palma in the Taxi recreations, which
Oh,
is which is kind of interesting, but
yeah, that's true.
but it's so weird. We're seeing them recreate scenes from Taxi like 20 years later.
It is. It's really like I
Yeah,
mean, I was a huge fan of Taxi back in the day. I would always
it's a
watch
great show. Yeah,
Yeah, it's fantastic. That theme song. My God, it's
yeah,
iconic. But geez,
yeah.
this Angela from Bob James. Download it, guys. It's a banger. Like every time I drive across like the Queensboro Bridge, I always have that song in my head.
Sure, sure.
But yeah, like it is weird to see like all the original people just dressed up, how they used to back in the '70s and
Right.
recreate all these scenes. It's like
and
it's a
and
trip, man.
and they age pretty gracefully, so they don't look too different. I mean, it's enough that they can get away with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, Judd Hirsch hardly looked any different. Mary Lou Henner aged beautifully.
Hey now.
Um, you know, uh, Christopher Lloyd's Reverend Jim. He's always looked kind of weird anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. I did like they show the cast taking like a curtain call after the taping, and you see like Christopher Lloyd and Jeff Conway. They just both start frantically humping Mary Lou Henner,
Oh boy.
and I'm just like, well, I wonder if they did that every week. And hey, I don't blame you if you have the chance to frantically hump Mary Lou Henner. You take it.
Oh boy.
But yeah, I thought that was very funny, and it was kind of cool that they came back to recreate their roles from back in the day. Um,
Right, yeah, it's definitely a throwback
yeah,
to see the
yeah,
old gang in their old gear.
yeah, and uh, Andy also he demands to get his own special, uh, and where he like meets Howdy Doody
Oh yeah, yeah.
because like he was a huge fan of Howdy Doody apparently, and I think it took a few years for the network to actually air that special because it was just so out there. It was so weird.
Yeah, like one of the things that the networks really didn't like is like Andy wanted the editors that were putting together the special to mess with the vertical hold.
Yeah,
So like you'd see like the picture kind of flicker up and down, and then he said, "I want that because like then people at home will think there's something wrong with their TVs, and they'll get up and bang on the TV, and
right.
there's nothing wrong with their TVs. It's like me messing with the vertical hold. Isn't that funny?
Yeah,
And it
and
kind
so
of
again,
is.
he's making the audience the butt of the joke.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's just doing things to entertain himself rather than the audience.
yeah. That's actually something that George Shapiro says in this film. It's like, are you doing, like, are you like, who are you trying to make laugh here? Are you trying to make yourself laugh, or are you trying to make the audience laugh?
Yeah. And I
Which,
think 9 times out of 10, yeah, it was himself.
yeah,
Um,
very much so. Well, even Andy Kaufman had said, like, he is not he doesn't consider himself a comedian. Like, I think he even says
right.
he said it
He
in a
says I'm a song and dance man.
right, like he said, in an interview saying, "I'm not a comic. I have never told a joke. The
Right.
comedian's promise is that he will go out there and make you laugh with him. My only promise is that I will try to entertain you as best I can." And
Yeah.
yeah, he's like, if you think about it, like, yeah, he never tells jokes. He's just kind of does this thing to like poke and prod and kind of
Yeah.
subvert
Well, I mean, he
expectations.
just loved dancing around in that area of where you go, Wait, is this real? Is this a put on?" And I mean, with Kaufman, it almost always was a put on of some kind, but he kept finding new and creative ways to do that. And that's certainly not for everybody, but I mean, he was very, very good at it and very, very clever with it. And
Yeah.
one thing I'd forgotten about this movie is it it had a lot more of the wrestling period than I'd remembered.
Mm.
I mean, that was a big thing that Kaufman did for a few years, where he positioned himself as the intergender wrestling champion of the world, and he would challenge women to wrestle, and he would beat women because and this was like half a sincere thing for him, was that he was sincerely a huge fan of wrestling and he wanted to be like a wrestling heel.
Yeah, yeah. Like, cause they also had that scene where Bob Zmuda took him to a brothel,
Hmm.
and he chose two women, and like they just show him wrestling with the women in the
Yeah,
bed, and so like, yeah, he was always like just into wrestling like that, and like he just found something really interesting about the pageantry and the spectacle of it. Like that I would say was Andy's big thing. He was really into spectacle, if anything.
yeah, yeah.
Like that was his big kick.
Yeah, and
And
he recruits a couple of the sex workers from, I think it was supposed to be the Bunny Ranch, the brothel in Nevada, um, and he's like, "Hey, would you like to come with me and ruin a TV show?" And he gets the, these two ladies to come with him because he gotten the producers of Taxi to agree to give his alter ego, um,
Tony Clifton.
Tony Clifton, who's the annoying lounge singer,
Oof.
to guest star on Taxi. And they wrote a script for Taxi, and it was gonna be Tony Clifton playing Louis De Palma's brother. And I think they did this episode with somebody else. I don't think they just ate the script, but he disrupted the show so much that he was escorted off the lot by security. He was fired and escorted off the lot by security.
Right.
So
And Kaufman got a kick out of that, and the incident was
yeah.
reported in the paper. And again,
Hmm.
that's just him, like a little boy being naughty, getting chuckles off of just messing with people.
Right, right. But I mean, I think the movie does exaggerate it somewhat. I think some people have said like, "Oh no, I mean, like Kaufman would tell you that he was Tony Clifton." I
Right.
mean,
Right.
and so I think they're playing it up a little bit for the movie. I mean,
Yeah.
but that's the weird thing, is it's tough to know what's real and what's not because the myth has gotten mixed in so much with the factual information. So
Yeah, it's always weird. You never know who was in on the joke and who wasn't.
yeah,
I mean, if you want to hop ahead a little bit, like
yeah,
another
go for it.
another incident that sort of fills that mythos, that thing of who was in on the joke and who wasn't. The huge incident on the show Fridays he was on.
Yeah, yeah,
That was insane.
yeah. And Fridays, it's a nearly forgotten show. I remember watching it a bit as a kid. I think it aired in prime time because it must have, because I watched it as a kid. Um, but it was a sketch comedy show, aired on Friday nights. I guess it was live. I don't remember that it was live, but maybe it was.
I'm
Um,
pretty sure it was. Like, I know.
yeah,
And I know Michael Richards was on it, of Seinfeld fame.
right,
I
right.
believe Larry David was on it as well, if I'm
Yeah,
not
I think that was where Larry David met Michael Richards.
mistaken. Nice.
So, But yeah, he Kaufman guest starred on the show. He was like the celebrity guest or the celebrity host of that week, and they did a sketch, and you can find this sketch on YouTube where he's part of uh, a couple couples on a double date, and the joke in the sketch is each one goes to the bathroom in turn, and they get high. They smoke a marijuana cigarette, and then they come
Ooh.
back and they're all high. And it's so weird, is because like they literally explain the premise of the sketch before they start the sketch. And it's like you couldn't figure out a way to get this information in the sketch itself. We have to just have an intro saying like, "Here's what the joke is in this sketch."
Yeah, like once you get told the joke, then what's the point of the sketch?
I don't know. I don't know. But that's the real sketch was like that. And in their recreation of it, they have Norm Macdonald playing Michael Richards. Oddly enough,
Tall, curly hair. That's good.
yeah, yeah. And it's so we got more Norm Macdonald as circa
Ah,
1980 Michael Richards.
Michael Richards, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And Caroline Ray from Sabrina the Teenage Witch. She's playing another one of the sketch performers in it. And yeah, and the joke in this was Kaufman breaks character and he says like I don't want to play high. I don't want to like promote drug use. Uh,
Yeah, and then like, yeah, and he totally like it's like the worst improv partner ever. Like he just totally
yeah,
brings the entire sketch to a halt. Where
he's not yes ending. He's no budding.
yeah, exactly. And then like apparently all the other actors are like, "What are you doing, man? We're live here." And it's like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, like
yeah,
no, I feel dumb doing this. This is a dumb sketch." And
right.
apparently, like everybody was upset with him. And at this point, Michael Richards, Norm Macdonald, he gets up from the scene, picks up takes the cue cards that the cue card guy is holding, and just slams them down in front of Andy Kaufman, and that
Yeah,
gets a huge
yeah,
laugh from the audience.
right.
And
Michael
yeah,
Richards said since that he was in on the gag. He said like they let him in on the gag the day before. Um, and we see Kaufman get into a shoving match with the producer, who's played by the real life Bob Smuda, by the way. Which I think that was a nice touch. They worked up clever cameos for Bob Smuda and the real George Shapiro playing
yeah,
people
yeah, yeah,
who didn't get the joke. So I thought that was kind of a cool way to work them both in.
yeah. No, it was great. And yeah, and in the sketch, then I think that Andy throws a drink in Michael Richards' face, and then a whole big
Yeah,
melee and fight ensues. The audience
right,
gasps in horror at all this,
right,
and it is a thing where you're thinking, well, is like who's in on it, and who's not? Is this whole thing fake or is it not?
right, right.
And
And then
yeah,
they cut to commercial, and then the producer or the network executive, played by the great Vincent Schiavelli, who's in a lot of Milos Forman's films. He says, like, "Ladies and gentlemen, you've just been part of a happening." It's just, oh, it's so hilarious how he says that line. He is just one of the all-time great character actors. He's probably best known for being like the subway ghost in Ghost.
yes, of course.
But he's popped up in a million things. He's in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He's in Batman Returns, uh, and he had just such a great face. He's just I love seeing him pop up in movies, man.
Yeah, he has a very memorable look. You look at him, you're like,
Yeah,
oh, I remember him.
yeah, yeah. Just a great face and a great actor, man. And then he says like, "Oh, when we come back from the break, Andy's going to explain that it was all a joke." And then Andy comes back and he's like, "No, they forced me to do this. I'm, but the truth is, this happens on TV all the time, and they just always cover it up. In real life, apparently, he came back the next week, and he was issuing an apology, and they filmed it like a hostage video.
Oh boy.
So they're taking a little artistic license there,
Okay.
but um,
Yeah, but that was Andy. He just really liked to mess with the audience and mess with expectations. Like another thing that I really liked, that he did that I enjoyed from this film is they showed when he was doing colleges and he was trying to like kind of distance himself from his Latka character on Taxi because he really didn't like doing it. He only did it
right,
so he can make a
right,
special. So there's this one show he's doing a performance at Arizona State at this college,
hmm
and he wants to go into his act, and the audience full of college kids is like, hey, do Latka, say thank
Right.
you very much, do that there, and like, of course, he's getting very annoyed by it. He doesn't want to do the, say his catchphrase or whatever,
Right. Right.
and
So
then
he decides as punishment to read The Great Gatsby to them.
right, and then that's it. He's literally just reading The Great Gatsby, word for
Right.
word, in a British accent.
Yeah.
And of course, you can hear the audience not understanding it, like what is going on, and this being impatient, and then like them just like turning on him and just screaming and booing. And then at one point, he's like, "Well, look, if you do you want to hear this or not? Because if you don't want to hear this, I can play what's on this record." And the audience is
Yeah.
like, "Yes, please play the record, whatever." And he
Yeah.
plays the record, and it's a recording of him reading The Great Gatsby.
And
That's
it's from the exact point that he stopped,
Now
which is
that's pretty damn clever.
that's pretty genius. Yeah, and he did that bit on either the Tonight Show or SNL. I forget which, but you can find footage of him doing that, and I mean that's pretty cool. I don't know if he ever did it as like punishment for unruly audiences, but I think that might be like a movie convention. But I think that was just like one of his bits.
Oh, okay. But either way, I'm like, all right, that's pretty damn clever.
Yeah, and um, yeah, that's pretty cool. They also, and it's funny seeing like the recreations of him on SNL. Like they have Richard Belzer playing himself, and I think Belzer was like maybe a warm up on SNL in the early days, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he was, because I think they said when
Yeah,
Andy Kaufman did his Mighty Mouse act, actually like
right,
George Carlin was hosting. But
right. Yeah, because I mean we covered the first episode of SNL. I think it was on our 100th episode,
it sure
and yeah,
was.
George Carlin hosted for real, but I guess they couldn't get George Carlin in 1999. So they got Richard Belzer, which he was a friend of Andy Kaufman, so I'm sure he was happy to be in the movie. And it's always fun to see Richard Belzer, however briefly.
The
And he's just like,
bells.
hey, on our first show. And yeah, he recreates the Mighty Mouse bit, the very famous Mighty Mouse bit where he's singing along to the record. And still funny.
It's yeah, it still holds up.
And it's funny to see Lorne Michaels kind of made up to look like how he looked in the 70s, like his hair is darkened and he's dressing like he is. And like when David Letterman pops up later in the film, David Letterman is just David Letterman. He doesn't make any effort to try and look like how he looked like in the early 80s.
Yeah, I think
He's,
yeah, I think
he's not wearing a wig. He's not even taking off his glasses.
yeah, like I think they tried to do that, but he was just like, "No, I'm not doing that."
Yeah, yeah,
It's like,
which is kind of hilarious in its own way.
oh, God bless you, David Letterman. God bless you.
And yeah, it's just so funny. I mean, we see Lorne kind of going along with the gag, and he's like playing himself, but he's playing himself as he looked in that era. And Letterman, he's on this like extensive recreation of his old late night set, and then the camera pans over to Paul Schaefer, and it's Paul Schaefer bald like he is
Yeah,
in that time,
yeah, Bald
and it's
Schaefer.
David Letterman looking how he looked in 1999.
Yeah, they really didn't. I was like, all right, well, I'll just
Yeah,
suspend
yeah,
disbelief here.
yeah, and it's so funny. I mean, Dave is like literally recreating a segment of his show, but he kind of portrays himself as being much more in on the gag that I feel like he might have been in real life.
Okay.
You see him cracking up a lot more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's
Yeah,
very true.
it's there's actually a cool segment on YouTube where somebody went in and they found real footage of all the Andy Kaufman bits they recreated in the movie, and you can actually compare how different Letterman is acting in the recreation. And he's mugging a lot more. He was
Mm.
much more deadpan in the original clip.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess maybe he thought, oh, I should play it up a little bit more, just for.
Yeah, or maybe that's just how he was reacting in the moment. But yeah, he appears as much more in on the joke in this one, and I don't know if that was the case in the real bit, but it's a very famous Letterman bit where Andy Kaufman goes on with Jerry Lawler, and they're playing up their whole feud, and Kaufman like throws water on Lawler, and Lawler like slaps Kaufman out of his chair.
Yeah. That was a big thing because
Yeah,
I mean before this, like because like at this point, like Andy was like just wrestling women,
yeah,
and of course there's a scene where Andy meets his girlfriend Lynn, played by
right,
Courtney Love, through women wrestling,
right. That's a
and
total fabrication, by the way. He didn't meet her that way.
oh really?
Yeah,
Wow. All right. See, what? I don't know. They keep messing with me, man. This movie.
yeah,
But yeah. So, and yeah, through the lady wrestling, I think at one point he's wrestling in Memphis, and then Jerry Lawler calls him out off
right,
stage, saying, hey, he's a fake. He only wrestles women. That woman he's wrestling now is his girlfriend Lynn, and blah blah blah. And you also see
right,
Jim Ross, who's a wrestling announcer from the WWE, who's been doing it
right,
for decades.
right. Yeah,
And
and Jerry Lawler is playing himself.
yes, Jerry the King Lawler playing
Yeah,
himself. And yeah, so then the two of them wrestle. There's a huge wrestling match, and I think Andy like gets a broken neck or something. Like he gets like seriously injured, and his neck's in a cast from
right.
it. And then it's also the thing where like people don't know, all right, is this an act? Is this real? Like
Yeah,
who's in on it, who's not? It's always
and I in real life I know he wore the neck brace briefly, but he wore it for like weeks longer than he needed to, just for the bit.
mm,
So he pretended that he was severely injured, where he was maybe only mildly injured. I mean, because like Jerry Lawler, professional wrestler, knows what he's doing, and he knows how to do that sort of stuff safely.
right, yeah.
And yeah, the movie reveals that they were in on it the whole time, and that was like really the first time that it was revealed for real. Um, and Bob Zmuda wrote about that in his book a bit. He said like he says, although I made a pact with Andy never to reveal the truth behind that ill-fated evening and the events leading to it, I've decided to break that vow and come clean. The reason I am doing it only now is that Universal Studios, the entity behind the film Man on the Moon, has chosen to be truthful about Kaufman's antics and disclose in the movie what really happened. I feel it is my duty to take their lead and expand on their revelations accurately and in detail. So he goes into the whole story behind it in the book.
Yeah, okay.
So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, and yeah, they have a scene right after the Letterman thing where George Shapiro is saying like, well, I think it's best if you were getting so much bad press about this. I think it's best if you two don't do anything together ever again. And you're supposed to think that it's Andy Kaufman and Bob Zmuda being talked to, but it's
Mm.
Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler who's like, hey, I love doing this. This was
Yeah.
like one of wrestling's shining moments as far as I'm concerned.
He was in on it the whole time.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting. It's
Yeah, no, it's entertaining, and I think that's always what Andy wanted to do. Like
yeah,
like I said, he want at the very least he wanted you to be entertained by the spectacle he was putting on.
right,
Like,
right.
you know,
And also in this era, Andy Kaufman is voted off Saturday Night Live.
mm,
They actually Kaufman was getting such bad publicity over the whole wrestling thing and stuff. They actually put it to an audience vote, and they had a bit on the show. In the movie, they presented as Lorne Michaels presenting the vote, but that's a fabrication because this was during the era when Lorne Michaels wasn't producing the show. He'd
yeah,
stepped away from the show for 5 years, and SNL cast member at the time, Gary Kroger,
ooh,
was introducing this. So it's so weird because like Lorne is like taking responsibility for something he had nothing to do with in the movie. So
yeah.
that's kind of funky.
I don't know why they couldn't just gotten Gary Kroger to do that.
Well, I think it's just because Lorne Michaels is so identified with SNL. I mean, and probably casual fans don't even realize that there was a time when he wasn't producing the show.
Yeah, that makes
Because I mean,
sense.
even by 1999, Lorne kind of was identified with the show because he'd been with the show since the beginning.
Yeah, no, that's
and
very true. That's very true.
it had been by that point nearly 15 years since he'd come back to the show, so it's kind of like he never left. So,
Yeah, that's very true.
but
Oof.
it's so yeah, it is so weird that it's essentially Lorne Michaels playing a cast member on SNL in a weird.
Lorne Michaels, Molly
That's
Shannon.
Barry Kroger.
Oh,
And they shot the SNL scenes at the real Studio 8H, and
that's cool.
they made it look like it did back in the day. So,
Oh, wow, that's pretty neat.
but I find that so fascinating that it's like Lorne Michaels is like it in a recreation of something he had nothing to do with.
Oh my god, that is
That's
bonkers.
so weird. Yeah.
Very much so. Uh, yeah, it's I don't know. Wow, yeah, there's just so much to Andy. It was very interesting, and
Yeah.
yeah, he really, I don't know, he really kind of messed with people's minds. Like, and of course, towards the end of the film, we all know he passed away from lung cancer, and like
Yeah.
when we get up to that part where him and his girlfriend Lynn move in together, and he finds that lump on his neck,
Right.
and like he goes to a comedy club to tell people, hey, it turns out I have cancer. I got a lump. If anybody, since I'm quasi famous still, if anybody in the audience wants to come on stage and touch it, I'll charge you like $1. And somebody,
Right.
I was like, oh, did that really happen? Oh, good lord, that is
I think he did do that. Yeah. Yeah.
good gravy. And then even when he tells his closest friends, George Shapiro, Bob Zmuda, and Lynn, that he has cancer, like they don't believe him.
Yeah.
even like
And Zamuda
as
was
soon
like, "Oh yeah, that's a great bit. Here's how we could do it. We could milk it, and you could do go up and down with it, and yeah." And he's like, "We could even fake your death."
yeah, and it's like, oh wow, that really. I mean, it says a lot that he's so known for just bullshitting people and trying to pull the wool over people's eyes that when he tells the truth, no one believes him. It's the boy who cried wolf all over again.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And like, there's even like a scene where like the National Enquirer had heard he has cancer, and they don't believe him. Oh, and then also in that scene, you get a quick glimpse of Dave Keckner in there as one of the National Enquirer reporters too.
Oh, there's another sort of cameo. I don't know if it maybe it doesn't qualify as a cameo because I don't know how famous he was in 1999. But Patton Oswalt pops up in the movie.
Yes, and a
Did
big
you notice that? Because like one of the odd things about Andy Kaufman is he worked as a busboy a couple nights a week at a diner in Hollywood, and he was like, "Oh, I do this just to stay humble and and just good on his work." And it wasn't really a bit. He just like sincerely worked as a busboy.
yeah, need a second
And
gig, second
yeah,
income.
and we've got Patton Oswalt in there as with like a wig and a fake mustache, and he's like, "Hey, are you Andy Kaufman?" and I don't think it's really Patton Oswalt doing a cameo because I think at this point in time, Patton Oswalt was just like a struggling stand-up comedian taking acting work where he could.
Yeah,
But it's just,
I imagine he had been on like this King of Queens era. I guess he would have been on or something.
I guess maybe King of Queens had started by '97. It started after Seinfeld because Jerry Stiller was on that show, so probably whatever year after Seinfeld ended, and I can't remember when that ended.
Okay.
So
All right, but yeah, but still, it's like, oh, Patton Oswalt, look at him.
yeah, yeah, and it's just so funny. You're just like, oh, sudden unexpected Patton Oswalt.
It comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's always so weird when you see like somebody who becomes very famous later, and you see them as like a struggling young actor in something.
Yeah,
It's so
it's like
funny.
when we saw Groundhog's Day and Michael
Mhm.
Shannon was in it at
Oh yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
very end.
yeah.
I was like, look at him. All right, Neil before Zod.
But yeah, so by this point in Kaufman's life, yeah, like you said, he's cried wolf. He's pulled the wool over people's eyes so many times that hardly anyone believes that he actually has cancer and that he is legit dying.
Yeah, it's pretty sad, and also
Yeah,
at this part he's I mean he's doing like chemo and whatnot, but he's also doing because this is like another thing I kind of wish they went into more. Like
Uh-huh.
he was really into like transcendental meditation
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
whatnot, and like he was doing that. He was like putting like healing stones on his body and whatnot. Like I kind of
Hmm.
wish because like that's something not everybody gets into. So I kind of wish they had in this movie like why, like how he got into it, why it means so much to him. And
Right.
they didn't really kind of do that. I was like, I wish I'd known more about this or like this side of him, but I don't know. They kind of cut it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I definitely recommend reading Zamuta's book. I think you get a better sense of Andy Kaufman, the person, from that, and what he was about, and how much of him was real. Um, but yeah, apparently he was a very sincere follower of TM, Transcendental Meditation, and like towards the end of the movie, he's asked to leave because he's kind of getting so much bad publicity.
Yeah.
Um, and they gloss over some other things. They gloss over some things in his career, like he did a movie called Heartbeeps with Bernadette Peters, not even mentioned in the movie
Oh
because
wow,
it was such an infamous bomb.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, do a Google image search on that sometime. He's playing like a robot. They're both playing robots. It's a weird looking movie. I've never seen it, but
Oh, I think I heard of that. Wait, no, Heartbeats. Yeah, they're both
Heartbeeps. Yeah,
and they're both robots. Like almost.
they're robots who fall in love or something like that. Yeah,
Huh. I vaguely remember hearing something like yeah, it kind of sounds like
yeah,
AI that Spielberg movie.
yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Um, but big old flop that one. um, and they have a scene towards the end of the movie where he goes to like a faith healer in the hopes that somehow his cancer get cured, and he sees the guy like just palming chicken guts like moments before, and he pretends like, oh, I'm pulling the cancer out of you,
Yeah.
and we see this look on Kaufman's face as he realizes he's kind of been had, and the irony of it, and then it cuts right from there to him in his coffin, which
It was yeah, it was a bit unnerving, to say the least.
yeah,
I was like, could we have not done that?
yeah,
But then and then also you see like above his casket like this black and white film of Kaufman talking to the audience, um,
right,
and I kind of in a way consoling them, saying, "Yeah, I'm gone, but it's still a beautiful, wonderful world out there, and I
right.
want you to put your arms around somebody, the person next to you, even if you know them or like them or not." And they had like a nice little sing along, which like I was like, oh, that's a sweet way to do it,
Hmm.
sweet way to go out. I just might have that for my own funeral.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, and the movie, because it's a biopic, they have cameos from like most everybody we've seen over the course of the movie. I understand. Apparently, the only person from Taxi who went to his funeral was Carol Kane in real life.
Mm,
So yeah, and
okay.
I don't know if that's because the Taxi people didn't like him too much, or if they just had
Hmm.
conflicts or whatever. I don't know what the story is there. He did apparently piss off the people from Taxi occasionally because
I could see
like
that.
there was one time where Tony Danza like kind of picked a fight with him at some after party thing, and he's like, you think you're better than us, Kaufman? And Kaufman was like, no, and but it kind of pissed him off that he wasn't there every day like they were.
I I can understand that because like
Yeah,
Kaufman is like because he was like super hot at the time and people loved
yeah,
him and his catchphrase, so he could like kind of but like Kaufman really didn't care about the show and he just
yeah,
wanted to do his
yeah,
own thing, so like the network was probably a little way more lenient with him than they were with the other cast members, which I mean that would cause resentment. I get it.
yeah,
I totally
yeah,
get it.
yeah. And apparently after that, like, uh, he didn't mix with the rest of the cast socially that much.
Yeah,
So
it seems like he did. It seems like he just kind of did his own thing. Like, yeah, I'm just here to do this TV show. Like, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to
right.
I'm here to do this, get my
The
check, and bounce.
the story I love though is that when they brought Carol Kane on to play his girlfriend and later wife on the show, Simca,
Mhm.
he taught her the fake language from Caspiar by inviting her over to dinner and forbidding her to speak English.
Oh.
They just spoke in Caspian, whatever the language was called. They just spoke in that fake language for the entire night, and that was how he taught her the language.
Oh, okay. All right, so that makes sense. So she had a closer relationship to
I
Andy than
think
anybody
so,
else.
or at least they did for that bit.
Okay.
So
All right. Oh, also, I think I read online that actually Andy Kaufman's actual girlfriend Lynn is in that funeral scene. Like she's supposed to be
yeah,
one of the
she is. She
mourners.
pops up in there. Yeah. Did you know that, like in real life, he dated Elaine Boozler?
What?
Yeah, he and Elaine Boozler like lived together.
The booze? Boozy?
Yep.
Huh. I was not aware of that.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Well,
Um.
good on you.
hmm
Good on you, Kaufman. Yeah, there was like a lot of things that they kind of left out of this film. Like there was one thing. I mean, well, we can also go into this too. Is we
Yeah.
also well, I recently watched the Jim and Andy documentary that's on Netflix. Called Jim and
Yeah,
Andy.
I've seen that before. I didn't rewatch that for this, but yeah, that that thing is insane because it has all this behind the scenes footage, and apparently, like Jim Carrey went really method
Yeah,
playing Andy Kaufman. He was like refusing to drop character in between scenes. He had everybody addressing him as Andy, and
it was very much like a Daniel Day Lewis or even like what is it? I'd say like Heath Ledger as the Joker type of thing, where like he wouldn't drop character. He would be in that character way longer
right,
after the cameras were off, and it almost got to the point where it seemed like it almost kind of drove him mad a little bit, just because he was Andy, when on and off camera. Then he was Tony Clifton on and off camera. Then they showed
right,
footage of him because this is all footage that Jim Carrey shot back in 98, 99 when they were shooting it. And it was
right,
like Tony, he was in character as Tony talking about Andy and talking about Jim. Like you see him saying things about
hmm
Jim Carrey, like, "Oh, Jim Carrey, he's a hack. He just needs attention and love," and like saying like kind of really, fucked up shit. Like I don't know, like it was weird,
but
man.
it's in a weird way. Okay, and this is I haven't watched this thing in a couple of years because it came out in 2017, and apparently they withheld the footage at the time because I thought it made Jim Carrey look like too much of an asshole,
I
which is kind of hilarious.
Yeah. Oh, also, did you see the Martin Freeman quote about that?
No, no, what was it?
You go ahead and I will read that right after.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Well, I mean, it seemed to me like a lot of it was Jim Carrey just kind of doing his idea of what Andy Kaufman was like. And he was like, "Oh, Andy Kaufman never dropped character, so therefore I'm never going to drop character." But apparently, in real life, Andy Kaufman would drop character at times. Like Jerry Lawler has said that Jim Carrey as Andy would be like harassing him off camera, and at one point, like he spit in Lawler's face, and Lawler grabbed Carrey's neck. And apparently, that never went on with the real Andy and Jerry Lawler.
Right. Yeah. It's a weird thing where somebody has this perception of who an artist was and wants to
Yeah,
stay true to that rather than actually knowing who they want to be true to maybe the mythos or the legend of Andy Kaufman without actually knowing
right,
who
right.
Andy was.
And there were times in that thing where I'm watching and I'm just like, Okay, you're not really like, it's not like it's a psychotic break. You're just kind of performing your idea of what you thought Andy Kaufman would do at times.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It seemed very calculated to me.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like, I mean, if you watch the doc, I thought it was interesting, but yeah, there was a lot of that in there. A lot of like kind of Jim Carrey almost going mad about like
Yeah,
who's Jim, who's Andy, who's Tony, type of thing.
yeah,
And there was one
yeah.
thing that they threw in there that like I didn't even know about, like Andy Kaufman's daughter,
Uh
that
huh.
like was like kind of was not in the doc at all, because like they were talking about how they were shooting the scene where Andy was on SNL doing the Mighty Mouse sketch, and Andy's actual father, Stanley Kaufman, was there, and like
hmm
Jim greeted him as Andy Kaufman and had like this weird moment. And they also said there was a part where where Andy's daughter, that no one really kind of knew. Well, I don't say know about it, but people didn't know about, was on the set
Right.
as well. And I was like, oh, Andy had a daughter? I didn't know about that. And yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
apparently Andy Kaufman had a child out of wedlock with in high school with his teenage girlfriend at the time, and they gave the kid up for adoption. And like
Hmm.
the girl didn't know who her father was until like '92, I believe. And
Wow.
I was like, oh, why wasn't that in the doc? That's like pretty interesting. But maybe it's a thing where like they just didn't want to put that in
Well, I
there, I
guess
guess.
because because he gave her up for adoption. She just didn't figure into his life that much. Because, like, what do you do with that? In a
Mm.
biopic.
Yeah, that's true.
She's living her own life somewhere. So
Yeah, that's true, I guess. But but still, it would have been kind of interesting. Like, there's like a lot of interesting
yeah.
stuff, like how Andy got into playing the bongo because he's really into congas, and I think that happened when some Nigerian musician came to his high school and introduced him to, and he got really into congas. Like, I thought, like, that would have been interesting to see in the film too,
Hmm.
and
And it's interesting. Jim Carrey, when Andy Kaufman's congos uh, or bongos, whichever they are, when they went up for auction, Jim Carrey bought them, and it's his real uh, conga set that's in the film. So
yeah, I think, and at one point Jim even says, "Hey, there's even like a little bit of blood on them," and it's like, "Oh, that's a little bit
hmm
of DNA
hmm
from the maestro." I was like,
yeah.
"Ah, that's."
Did you find that Martin Freeman quote, by the
Yes,
way?
I did. All right, so what I was mentioning was so about a year ago. Oh shoot, I lost the page. Hold on, I got it. About a year ago, Martin Freeman was on. Martin Freeman, as we all know, the actor from Sherlock, Black Panther, the original UK Office. He was on a
Hmm.
podcast called Off Menu, which was I think broadcast through Entertainment Tonight Canada, and like I don't know, somehow the conversation got to Jim Carrey and his work on Man on the Moon, and like how he was method, staying in character off camera. And Martin Freeman says, "quote For me, and I'm genuinely sure Jim Carrey is a lovely and smart person, but it was the most self-aggrandizing, selfish, fucking narcissistic bollocks I have ever seen." The idea anything in our culture would celebrate that or support it is deranged, literally deranged. I am a very lapsed Catholic, but if you believe in transubstantiation, then you're going somewhere along the line of, I became the character. No, you didn't. You're not supposed to become the fucking character because you're supposed to be open to stuff that happens in real life because someone at some stage is going to say cut, and there's no point going, what does cut mean? Because I'm Napoleon. Shut up.
I love that. I think I can't remember if this was Martin Freeman or somebody else who said it. But somebody made a great point about like method actors, and it's like you never hear about somebody being a method actor as like a really nice person. It's always like
Yeah.
it's always that they're just doing this asshole behavior. You hear about like Jared Leto, he's like mailing used condoms and dead rats to the cast of the
Oh.
Suicide
Oh,
Squad.
fuck that
And it's
guy.
just like you just want an excuse to be an asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like,
you know you never hear about like, oh well, Tom Hanks was playing Mr. Rogers, so he was like perfectly lovely to everyone that he met during all those months. But like, yeah, Jim Carrey apparently took it to the point where even when he had to meet Ron Howard about starring in the Grinch movie, he was like in character as Andy Kaufman, which
yeah.
now you're just being a jerk to Ron Howard.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, I sort of get it because you really want to be in the mind of the person you're emulating or trying to
I
be
mean,
in the
I
movie.
get wanting to maintain your focus and all that, but there are still limits. I mean,
Yeah. Like, no, a lot of people don't want to play your games. So sometimes you'll have
yeah,
to drop
I mean, look,
the persona.
you still have to pay like Jim Carrey's power bill, right?
Yeah. You
You
can't.
know what? What are you signing the checks like Andy Kaufman?
Hi, Mr. Carey. This is Paul at Verizon. You gave us a check signed Andy Kaufman. We can't accept this.
Right? Yeah. This man has been dead since
Yeah,
1983. He does not have a valid checking account any longer.
yeah. We're closing your FiOS account. So sorry.
Um, so it's just It's just kind of nuts.
Yeah, like it can, like, I do admit it, when you're doing method acting like that, it can seem pretty like you're some full of yourself actor, self important. You know,
Yeah,
like the type
yeah.
of character they were making fun of in Tropic Thunder, like the Kirk Lazarus of the
Right,
world.
right. And apparently, like, some of the other actors in the movie had problems with it. Like the guy playing Andy Kaufman's father had a problem with it.
Right. Yes.
And Jerry Lawler, of course, had a problem with it because he's abusing Jerry Lawler, even though that apparently was not something that Andy Kaufman did for real. Um, I don't. You don't see much of Paul Giamatti in the doc, do you?
Not really. I mean, you see him
Yeah.
a little bit, like when Jim is in character as Andy off set, and then you
Right.
see him next to Paul, and then Paul talks to the camera. It's like, wow, he's not breaking characters. Really going for it.
Yeah, but you also see him like cracking up in the makeup trailer a
Yeah,
bit too. So I don't know how seriously Paul Giamatti was taking this.
yeah, it is
It's
weird. Like you never know who's in on it, who's not. Like who's. I mean,
yeah,
you could definitely tell. Like there's a few scenes where, uh, like when he's Tony Clifton and just screaming and being a big old bore. At one point,
right,
like Tony Clifton rolls in with the Hell's Angels to set.
yeah,
They give him a ride to set, and you can definitely tell people are like. Some people are amused by it. Some people are like, "What is this?" Even I think even also in the doc, it's like footage of that Jim Carrey shot in '98, but then it's also modern day footage of Jim Carrey being interviewed by an interviewer, and the interview says
right,
like why would you continue this behavior offset as Tony Clifton, because he's this character no one likes. He's just like he's not funny. He's just like
yeah,
loud and crass and screamy. But like and like Jim defends it a little bit. It's like, yeah, well, he is funny in a way, like in a anarchistic, nihilistic type of way. There is a humor there.
yeah,
Which
yeah. The story I love though is that like Jim Carrey was invited to the Playboy Mansion at this
oh
time,
yeah, yeah.
and he shows up as Tony Clifton. But then halfway through the evening, they realize that it's not Jim Carrey as
Mhm.
Tony Clifton. He actually recruited Bob Zmuda to play Tony Clifton because Bob Zmuda would sometimes substitute for Andy Kaufman as Tony Clifton.
Right, yeah,
And
yeah.
so then Jim Carrey shows up as himself at the Playboy Mansion later, which by the way totally proves that he could drop character whenever he wanted.
Yeah, it does.
And so then they realize like, oh, we have no idea who this person really is at the Playboy Mansion. We're going to have the security escort him out. And that story I love. That is hilarious.
Yeah,
That is some epic trolling on Jim Carrey and Bob Smuda's part.
yeah, it shows like Tony Clifton taking pictures with Hugh Hefner and some Playboy bunnies. I think at
Yeah,
one point we see Andy Dick on camera being like, "Oh, is that Jim Carrey in character? He's
right.
fantastic." And like,
And I love that like Hugh Hefner and all those other people, they're like, oh, well, I'm really in on the joke. I mean, we're all going to treat him like he's Tony Clifton, but we all know it's really Jim Carrey. And it's like, no, you fucking don't know.
yeah, I think that's the thing. Like Andy loved to do. Like, if you're
Yeah.
in on the joke, then he's gonna change the joke. Like
Yeah,
he
exactly.
always wants to keep
And
you on your
that
toes.
I love that. That's an epic joke. If he'd done more of that sort of thing, I could get behind it more.
Yeah, exactly. And they also,
But it's like, what point does it serve to harass Jerry Lawler? Especially if that's not something that the real Andy Kaufman did.
yeah, exactly. Again, it's like somebody sort of believing the mythos and thinking
Yeah,
that was, the Bible, the gospel, and it
yeah,
really
yeah.
wasn't. But then, I don't know. But if guys watch Jim and Andy, see, I think it was fascinating. I also like,
Well, yeah. That I mean, it's definitely worth seeing. It's definitely a fascinating watch.
yeah, yeah. I also like the part that they had where he was just like hanging out with REM, like eating lunch,
Mhm.
like you know, on the set, on the
Right.
lot, and like how I think like after all this
'Cause
was shot, like,
we should say because REM did the soundtrack for this movie, and the title of the movie comes from the song that they did on their 1992 album "Automatic for the People," "Man on
mm,
the Moon," and that's a song about Andy Kaufman. And they wrote a new song for this movie, "The Great Beyond," which is another great song.
right. Actually, let me ask you this real quick. I kind of
Mhm.
know a little bit about REM. I know some of their stuff. Like,
Yeah.
what album would you say somebody should start with if they really want to get an REM?
Well, their big albums. I mean, their big mainstream breakthrough was probably Green, and then um, what was the album after that? Shit, I wasn't expecting to be quizzed about
Oh,
REM.
sorry. All right. I
No,
meant
no, no, no. I'm blanking on the album title. It's the one that "Losing My Religion" was on. It
oh
was the one right after Green.
out of
Um,
water. Hold on, I got it.
yeah.
Out of time.
Out of Time. Yeah.
You're
Thank you. That just went out of my. Out of Time's a good album. I mean, I like most all their albums, but yeah, Green and Out of Time, Automatic for the People. Those are all good samplings, and those are like REM's big mainstream heyday.
okay.
I mean, there's also they do have like a couple greatest hits compilations, so those are good. I always like getting greatest hits albums as a good sampler because then you can hear stuff from their early days up to their later period, and then if you like that stuff and you want to get more of it, there's always at least a song or two on each album that so
Okay. Yeah, because I remember.
that's how I go about it.
All right, all right. Yeah, because I remember one day, like I was, and yeah, listeners, we'll get back to Man and Moon in a minute. But yeah, there was
Nope, this is now an REM podcast.
no, because like there was this one like instrumental song I heard by them that I really liked,
Mhm.
called "White Tornado" on their album "Dead Letter Office." I was like, oh wow, I never know they did this.
Okay, yeah, a Dead Letter Office is like a collection of unreleased tracks and like B sides and things like that. So that's more obscurities.
Ah, okay.
Um, there and Life's Rich Pageant is one of their earlier albums. It's really good. Documents a good album. That's a song that has got The One I Love and End of the World as We Know It, which were two of their big early hits.
Leonard Bernstein.
Right. So yeah, those are good stuff, and I like their last couple albums. I think are pretty strong.
New Adventures in
So
Hi-Fi.
New Adventures of Hi-Fi is good. That's a bit more mixed. I was thinking. Hang on,
Col-
I'm just going to get a list up.
Collapse into Now.
Yeah. Collapse into Now. That was like their last album, and
Uh,
that I think was really strong. I think they went out on a high note.
okay.
Um,
See, there was a.
there are a couple greatest hits compilations. There's In Time, the best of REM. That's 1988 to 2003, and then there's Part Lies, Part Truth, Part Garbage, and that goes from 82 to 2011. And yeah, but they're a strong band.
Okay.
They're one of my favorites. Like in high school and college, like the sun rose and set among REM. So
Okay.
hi Scott.
All right. I'll give it a listen.
So yeah, so it's good stuff. Yeah, Collapse into Now is a strong album. I like Accelerate a lot too.
Okay.
Those are their last two albums. So yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll give it a listen.
There's also there was that blank. Yeah, I think Dead Letter Office is also a good collection of some B sides and obscurities and things like that. Yeah. So
yeah, because it had like this like surf rock type of vibe too, and I was like, oh, I kind of dig this. Like I didn't know they did.
Oh yeah.
Like
Okay. Yeah. That also has their cover. That's also got some fun, goofy stuff. They do a real drunken cover of Roger Waters' "King of the Road," and and they also do a thing called Walter's Theme, which is just a theme song they do for a local diner. There.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, there's some fun stuff on that.
Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, and
so those are my REM recommendations, folks.
REM commendations. Yes.
And they do a great song on the soundtrack of this movie too. There are a lot of instrumental tracks. From the soundtrack of this movie, and they do a nice job of it.
Yeah, and of course the movie ends with their Man on the Moon. It skips to 1 year later where we see Tony Clifton singing "I Will Survive" to like a packed crowd at the at the what you call it, at the Comedy Store, and of course we all
Yeah,
think it's Bob Zamuda, but then the camera sort of pans away and we see Bob Zamuda in the audience, and then the
yeah,
camera goes to like a neon face of Andy at the Comedy Store. So like it kind of
yeah.
gives this
So you're
little
questioning like, well, who is that? Because like there have been rumors for years that Andy Kaufman didn't really die, that he literally faked his own death, and that he was going to come back. And I don't think anybody's really saying that anymore because it's just been so long.
yeah, like I think he gone.
Yeah, if he had sincerely faked his own death and he was going to come back, he would have done it way before now. He would have done it at the latest during the release of this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they made this movie just to see if he would come out and be like, "Oh, I'm here."
Right, right.
Like this movie was bait, and we're hoping
Yeah,
he'd take the bait.
but it's a really interesting movie. I mean, I I think Jim Carrey's good in it. I mean, I'm a little. He puts in a good performance. I'm a little mixed on his performance at times. I think at times he does Jim Carrey it up a little. You
Mm.
know?
Yeah, I could see that. He does. It is a mix of the two a little bit, where he's
Yeah.
like he does his Jim Carrey thing, and it's
I mean, he's like Jim Carrey is just so much more of an
like a
not
physical.
extrovert, not ostentatious, but he's a much more out there performer.
Yeah.
Uh, Kaufman could be a lot more subtle, and subtle's not always in Jim Carrey's wheelhouse. So
No, it is. I saw The Mask. I know it's it's not
yeah,
in there.
yeah. Um,
Somebody stop me.
so at times he's like kind of pushing it a little. It's interesting, like a lot of high profile people auditioned for the role of Andy Kaufman. It came down to like Edward Norton and Jim Carrey, and
Oh,
Milos Forman supposedly couldn't decide between the two, so he just said to the studio, "You guys decide," and they went with Jim Carrey because Jim Carrey was more bankable. But
interesting.
I mean, it would have been really interesting to see what Edward Norton could have done with the part, and how Edward Norton could have alienated people while playing the part, because he would have.
I yeah. I mean, I like Ed Norton. I think he's a fantastic actor. I mean, ever since
Me too. Yeah.
what Primal Fear, I was like, oh, this dude's got the goods.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, I like him in most everything I've seen him in, but he would have alienated people in a whole different way.
yeah, like he does seem to be. I mean, he's not like totally like one of those pompous, I'm full of myself actors, but you see shades of it a little bit, where it's like, all right,
Yeah, that's in the mix. I
yeah,
think. I think it's fair to say.
yeah, he's
Um,
not at Jared Leto levels, but he's on the
no,
way.
I mean he has his moments.
Yeah, but he's good. He's good. We will say
He's
that.
good. Apparently, like Kevin Spacey was also interested in the
Oh
role.
boy, I think
John Cusack, Hank Azaria, they
mm,
all auditioned supposedly.
mm.
It says Nicolas Cage refused to audition, so he was passed over.
I'll do an audition. Oh,
I can see why you would definitely want somebody to audition for this, because you want to see what they can bring to it.
right, yeah,
Since like half the movie is like recreating Andy Kaufman's bits,
yeah,
you kind
exactly.
of have to see them do that.
Yeah, yeah, very
So
much so. Like
I
it's
get that.
yeah,
I get that.
that you definitely want to see it be done by somebody who understands like his Andy's mindset and like
Yeah,
can really kind
yeah,
of portray that on the big screen. Like I mean, as far as this movie, I thought Jim's performance was really good. I thought it was strong, but
yeah,
yeah, like I do agree with what you said. He can be a little too Jim Carrey ish, and
yeah.
but
At
like I mean, the
times,
rest of the movie,
and
yeah, at times. But
yeah,
yeah, like as far as but the rest of the movie, I don't know. I thought it kind of needed a little bit more. Like I thought, like all the other actors, I thought did an okay job, but nothing really like stellar. I guess like
I mean, I think Paul Giamatti's really good in the movie. I think Danny DeVito is really good. I mean, Danny DeVito can be a more restrained actor than he can get credit for. He's a good straight actor.
yeah, no, absolutely,
Um,
absolutely. People kind of forget that. 'Cause, I mean,
and
he's known for the comedies and Always Sunny and Taxi and whatnot,
yeah,
or
yeah.
all the Romancing the Stones or whatever. But like he
I mean,
can,
I think Courtney Love's pretty good as Lynn Margulies, as
yeah,
Andy's girlfriend. It's you don't see Courtney Love take many acting roles anymore.
Yeah, like for a while there, she it looked like Hollywood was ready to like make her the next it girl, because like like
Yeah,
her first big
she got an Oscar nomination for People versus Larry Flynn, if I
yeah
remember correctly.
yeah, and people were like, oh no, she's really good,
Yeah,
that's another.
yeah,
I think she kind of needed more to do in this film. She doesn't really get that much to do, I thought, but yeah, I
yeah.
don't know why like Courtney Love kind of just. I don't know if just because she wasn't getting the roles, or people thought she was difficult, or she just wanted to back away from the spotlight or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's a mystery.
it's a
It's a
mystery.
mystery.
Courtney Love, call in. Let us know what the deal is.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a good movie. I think it's worth seeing, and I think the Jim and Andy, the Great Beyond documentary is also very interesting viewing.
Mm,
So
darn tootin'.
they work in conjunction with each other.
Yeah,
So
it's a companion piece, if you
yeah,
will.
yeah. Does it make Jim Carrey look like an asshole? Yeah, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I will admit that. Like at the same, like yeah, there was a thing like, especially towards the end of the Jim and Andy doc, where he was kind of going off on some like a little bit of a hippy dippy diatribe. And it's
Uh huh.
like what is reality? What are we all doing here? Is reality just me and this coffee cup here, or is there more to it? Is this the universe we live in, or what is
Right.
matter? Like it got a little. I was like, all right, dude, let's just pull it back.
This was present day Jim Carrey getting
Yes,
new agey.
yes, this
Yeah,
was present
yeah.
day Jim Carrey. He gets very new agey, especially towards the end. There was
He can kind of disappear up his own hindquarters a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, back in the day in Ace Ventura, he should just talk out of it. Now he disappears with
Yeah,
it.
yeah. That's
Mm.
yeah.
Remember Ace Ventura? Fantastic.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
but yeah, either way, like it's an enjoyable film. I highly
Hmm.
recommend everybody check it out if you want to know a little
Yeah,
bit more
yeah.
about Andy Kaufman. Hmm. And that's the episode, guys. Thanks so much for listening, as always. Thanks for supporting our little podcast here. And as always, you can
Hmm.
follow us on Twitter at SNL Nerds Show. Can hit us up on our Patreon. Go to non-productive.com and give us some money, give us some bucks, give us some moolah, some schmeckles, some
Yeah.
molians, if you will. And rate, review, subscribe. Please tell people, spread the word. Why don't you? And as
Spread the
always,
word.
spread the
Yeah.
word. The bird's the word. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Darren Credible. That's DARIN Credible.
And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Trumbull Comic. That's TRUMBULL and the word comic. And you can follow the show's Twitter page at SNL Nerds Show. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, please give us a follow over there.
Please do. Please do.
Would this be a good time for me to reveal that I'm actually Jim Carrey and I've just been method acting as John Trumbull for this entire time?
What? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Would this be a good time to reveal that I'm actually Andy Kaufman and I've been playing Darren Patterson this whole time?
Wow, plot twist.
That's right. It's
Wow.
the long con.
That is wow. This is well, I mean, this is a lot to absorb.
It is,
people.
right?
This is
You thought I was dead.
Is there any point in continuing this podcast?
No.
I mean, should we just keep on going method?
Yeah. Is it at this point should I reveal that I'm not actually Andy Kaufman, but I'm actually Tony Clifton playing Andy Kaufman, playing Darren Patterson on this podcast?
Wow. Layers within layers within layers.
Should I bring up at this point that I'm actually Bob Zamuda playing Tony Clifton, playing Andy Kaufman?
I'm actually Paul Giamatti playing Jim Carrey, playing John Trumbull. So
I'm actually Courtney Love playing Bob Zamuda. Okay, I can't even say it. My brain hurts.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, come back next week, folks, and see who we are. Maybe we're ourselves again. Maybe we're somebody else. I don't know.
Who knows?
Who knows? Who can tell? We've gotten just way too meta and method.
We're through the looking
method man.
We're through the looking glass here, people.
We are. We really are. So yeah, go listen to some of the REM albums I recommended. That's good stuff. And check out Gilligan's Island and the Harlem Globetrotters.
Yes, absolutely. If you take anything away from this podcast, watch Gilligan's Island meets the Harlem Globetrotters while listening to REM.
Right. And yeah, it's like listening to Dark Side of the Moon with Wizard of Oz. They sync up.
It all matches up, man.
It all matches up. So, okay, well, that's your homework assignment for next week, folks. We'll be back here with another thing. But until then, nerds out!
This has been a non-productive media presentation. Executive producer, Frank Hablawi. This program and many others like it on the Non-Productive Network is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but ask before trying to change it or sell it. For more information, visit non-productive.com.